I had under contract a $1.2 million property. Beautiful property. I set up this contract with owner financing, waterfront property right on the Delaware River, multi-units, hundreds of years old, fully renovated, and I really wanted this deal, but I walked away. And 10 months later, it sold for less than my contract price. Emotions were high, and let me show you how my gut saved the day and prevented me from making a huge six-figure mistake. So this property was absolutely beautiful. Look at this thing. Look at these pictures. I mean, this thing was awesome. It was a historic property. It had 3 units. It was right on the Delaware River. It was across the street from a park. It was just absolutely fantastic. This was like a beautiful, beautiful place, and my emotions got the best of me. I went and looked at this thing. I was like, wow, I want this property. And I went and I just, my emotions were getting the best of me, and that is not how you buy property. This was a great area. It was a tourist area. It had a lot of potential as an Airbnb, and I'm like, wow, I'm going to make this thing work. This is the property. I'm going to get it. This thing's going to be huge. I'm going to do very well on this. So it wasn't the typical investment property, and that was the problem, right? I think I got so caught up in the beauty of the property that I kind of was trying to make numbers work when maybe they didn't. So let's take a look at the numbers and see if they worked or not. So this property I had under contract for $1.2 million. Like I said, I did negotiate owner financing, so I was able to get the seller to agree to 1/3 down, which is $400,000, an $800,000 loan, interest only. Year 1 is 5%, year 2 it's 6%, year 3 it's 7% with a balloon payment in 3 years, no prepayment penalty. So for $400,000, I was able to control a $1.2 million asset. Awesome. This property was a 3-unit. One was rented to a tenant at about $22.70 a month. And at $22.70 a month, that was very much below market because she was renting it to a friend of hers. The second unit was vacant because that's where she had lived. But that particular unit had a potential to rent for $2,200 a month. And the third unit, which was the biggest unit, was rented for $3,800 a month. So right off the bat, it had some decent income. It was bringing in $8,270 per month. So let's run some quick numbers. We did the 10-minute video, how to analyze a property in 10 minutes. This is the math, right? So the income for 1 year on the property, once you get it completely rented, would be $99,240. The taxes on the property are $8,885. The interest on the $800,000 at 5% interest only was $40,000 a year. The insurance was $47.69, and it was on the river, so the flood insurance was another $4,000 a year. So I did the math, and the approximate cash-on-cash return was 10%. Now, here's where it got interesting. This was a tourism area. A lot of people love this area, and I was looking at converting it to an Airbnb. So we already had a vacant unit, so we could start initially marketing it as an Airbnb. And a lot of the stuff there was already comes with the property. These items that were in the property, the furniture was already part of the property. So kind of like, hey, this makes sense. I actually met with some Airbnb people that run Airbnbs in New Jersey and are very successful at it, and had them come out and look at the property and evaluate the property. So while this thing would potentially cash flow as a regular long-term rental deal, it had a lot of potential as a short-term rental deal. So I kind of was looking at it, and conservatively, if this property was converted from long-term to short-term rentals as an Airbnb, my math was showing me that there would be about $40,000 a year in additional income. And that cash flow would be huge. The value would go up tremendously. I would be able to refinance out. I would be able to cash flow, and the property would be worth more because it's bringing in more income. So I was excited about this property. I was ready to make it go. And if you remember my other video on the 10-minute evaluation, maybe you can spot what I didn't take into account when I did these numbers up top. That being said, I jumped into my due diligence, and my due diligence is actually what saved me. So here's where I decided, okay, I got to slow down. I got to make sure this is a deal. I reached out to a lot of investors that I knew in my market. I spoke to them about it, and some of them were like, run, this thing's horrible. Others were like, hey, this is a great deal, jump on it, right? So I've experienced investors on both sides like giving me different ideas. I'm like, okay. And mind you, I've done mostly rental grade single family properties forever. This is more of a high end property. This is new to me. I haven't put in the reps on this yet. So I reached out to local investor in the area, like I said, who runs a bunch of Airbnbs all over the state. And I also reached out to a lot of local realtors that are in that market, that know the properties, that know that market, to get their opinion of value, because it was so hard to find comps on this property. There was nothing like it. First off, none of the properties that were comps were three families. Like that and there was unique. And a lot of the properties were newer. They were in neighborhoods. They weren't necessarily on the water. The stuff that was on the water, there's not much, so it didn't sell. Like it was really hard to determine what this property might be worth. So that was really made it difficult. And when you can't comp a property, sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. But in this particular case, on a $1.2 million deal, it's probably a bad thing, right? Because there's a lot to lose. The other thing that I needed to take into account was, while this property was beautiful and while this property was renovated, it was a 3-unit. It did not have that much square footage. The units were tight. There was a lot of, the units were well laid out, but the units were tight. They weren't huge units. They were more, it was a historical building, right? So the people that were going to be tenants there would love the charm and the historic aspect of the building, which is great for an Airbnb. But for rental like it really did not have a square footage, and the units were tight. So that kind of could play into some of the pricing power. On the other hand, it had two outdoor spaces that would be available on either side of the property, with fire pits and outdoor location for people to enjoy the property outside during peak tourist season. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. The price point was $1.2 million. So again, that's an interesting territory when it comes to buying a house that I think was maybe 3,000 square feet. So I look back and I did my buy box test, right? And one of the things is, in my buy box, is that I need to create 25% equity when I buy. This means that the property would need to be worth at least $1.5 million for me to be comfortable to buy it at 1.2. And the other fail in my buy box test is that the property is in a flood zone, and I normally don't buy in flood zones. And and part of me, again, emotions were running high, and I'm looking at, and this property is up higher. Even if it floods, like it's not going to get up until the main part of the property, and it's like all these things I'm doing in my head to try and justify that it's not an issue, that it's in a flood zone. And like as I said, I needed to make sure that this house was worth 1.5 million, and I could not prove that this house would be worth that. So I had a decision to make. I had the cash, I had the financing, I had the deal under the contract, and I said no. It was one of the hardest calls I've ever had to make in real estate, because I really wanted this property. And it probably, there was a little bit because of the numbers, right? The numbers weren't great as a long-term rental, but all this potential that was possible to create this Airbnb with this property, like I was emotional, because like, wow, this thing could be really a great cash flow property, and the place was beautiful. And it's exactly why I walked away, because when emotions get a hold of you, when emotions get a hold of me, right, and I start looking at that more than what the property actually is and how it's going to perform, it's probably going to cost me money. So what happened next? So it's interesting. I was thinking through ideas for videos and what I want to talk about. And what came up for me is, whatever happened to that property? I walked away from the contract. I canceled the contract. I walked away, and I said, whatever happened to that property? Of course, I look it up on Zillow. Mind you, I had it under contract for $1.2 million, and it ended up selling for $1.175. So $25,000 less than what I had it under contract for. So I really had no, so that now becomes the after repair value, so to speak, the value of the property, because now it got put on the market, and when it gets put on the market and it actually sold. So now we know what the property is actually worth. So I think that I did very well not to purchase this property because I would have had no equity. I would have had difficulty getting into refinance, and it would have been a lot of effort to start. Like, I manage single family properties. I know how to do long-term rentals. I have a system in place for long-term rentals, and to switch gears and start all of a sudden doing Airbnbs, that's outside of my lane. I'm getting out of my lane because I'm getting emotional about this property, and like, this property is going to be awesome, and like, I'm getting out of my lane. I'm getting into new territory, and like, did I really think through, do I want to do short-term rentals? Do I want to do Airbnbs? Probably not. And luckily, I was able to see that in this decision-making process and slow down and say, you know what? I really don't want Airbnbs. I really don't want to have to get all these different people in and out, and get cleaners in, and like all the stuff that's associated with that. I didn't want to do it. So just want to give you like, so that's kind of my thought process. I want to kind of give you a couple lessons that I took out of this particular adventure, and hopefully they're of value to you. So number one, emotion is the enemy. The prettier the property, the more dangerous it is. Beautiful buildings can make me dumb. So don't start justifying instead of analyzing. The numbers are what the numbers are. The value is what the value is. And if you can see a value add, great. But you need to buy the property for what it is, not what the potential is. So if you can't comp it, I would say be careful when you buy it. If you can't comp it, I wouldn't say don't buy it. But if you can't comp it, you need to take that into consideration that it may not be a property for you. To be honest with you, some of the properties that I couldn't comp, I've done the best on. And that's partially because I can't comp it. Nobody else can comp it. And the value is what somebody thinks the value is, which is kind of like weird to say. But if I have a property that it's very difficult to comp, I might have somebody come in who's interested in buying it who says, oh yeah, that's worth $300,000. And I might be like, I think it's only worth $250, but you think it's worth $300? I'll take it. But at the same time, that has a negative, because now when you have to get bank financing, a bank may have trouble determining what it's worth, and you might think it's worth $300, and the bank says it's worth $250, and now you can't get the loan that you need. So if you're going to keep something long term, it's probably a good idea that it's something you can comp. And again, I can't buy a property based on potential. I need to buy the property exactly where the property is. So with that being said, hopefully this video was of value to you. Actually, you know what? Before I even get into that, there's actually a couple more things, a couple more lessons. So the other big thing that I just remembered was my buy box, right? This property did not meet my buy box criteria. I wasn't able to get the 25% equity minimum, and it wasn't a flood zone. So for those two reasons, I should have passed on this property before I even got it under contract, but I didn't. So there's a reason I have a buy box, and it's very important that I stick to it. And the other thing is, especially when getting involved in a deal that is more significant, like, you really need to go through and do your due diligence. You need to look at everything. You need to talk to local experts, and you need to make sure you know all the rules, right? I was out there, again, I had it not even in my mind that I wanted to do Airbnbs, right? All of a sudden, this property as a potential Airbnb came in. I was getting out of my lane, and I'm spending all this time, effort, and energy learning how to do Airbnbs. Are Airbnbs legal here? What happens if they change the rules, and just all that stuff. And lastly, doesn't matter how beautiful the building is, the market doesn't care. The value of the property is what the value of the property is. So that's an important thing to remember. And lastly, you make money when you buy, right? When you buy the property, that's when you make the money. So just keep that in mind, right? When you buy the property and you get that 25% in equity, you just made money. So that being said, hopefully this video was of value to you. If you're looking at a property right now and you're not sure, slow down, do the work, talk to other people. Like I said in the previous videos, you are the sum or the average of the 5 people you hang out with. So hang out with people that are doing what you want to do, right? And now you have people to go to, and you need to bounce things off of, right? You're able to slow down, do the work, look at the numbers, and figure out if it's a deal. Because you know what? If this deal passes you and you don't get it, there's another deal behind it. There's no, I think they call it FOMO, right? There's no need to have FOMO. fear of missing out. So that being said, again, I appreciate you guys hanging out. It's been about 15 minutes. I've been blabbering on about this property and this deal that I ended up passing on. Hopefully you learned something from it. Keep in mind that I also have a website, and on that website you can actually book a chat with Chatto if you want to talk to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you. And also I have a offer on the website. I have a PDF that I created, a one-page PDF that you can bring when you go on your rental property. When you go to your rental property to do a site visit, if you have this sheet with you, every time you go, you're not going to miss anything. You're going to find any type of deferred maintenance that may need to get handled, potential problems that are lurking, and save yourself from potential service calls that are all of a sudden emergencies while they're not an emergency. So it gives you a great, it's a tool to put in your toolbox. You have print out a couple of these, you keep them with you, and whenever you end up at your property for whatever reason, spend 10 minutes while you're there, go through this checklist, and just keep your property running smooth. It goes a long way. Please like and subscribe. I appreciate it for the algorithm. Comment below, and I look forward to checking in again with you on the next episode of Chat with Chatto.